Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we have a little bit of a special review. This is going to be review number 2750. So we're getting tantalisingly close to review number 3000 and I'm sure we'll hit that mark before the end of 2021. But as I always do with these kind of mini milestone reviews, I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to you guys, the subscribers and followers of the channel. It's been a great journey over the last 7 3/4 years I think it's been now. Crazy to think that. I still remember, the first few videos that we were filming and things. But whether you guys have liked, subscribed, shared, sent me some beers, shown me around somewhere, or even just given me some information on different breweries and things like that, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you from the bottom of my heart. For me, this whole beer tubing thing is about the community, interacting with you guys that are following the channel and my fellow beer tubers, doing the hangouts, going and visiting different bars and stuff like this, visiting different places in the world. For me, that's what it's all about. That's what I really enjoy about this, and I'm sure will continue for another 7 3/4 years to come. There's lots more beers out there to try, and there's lots more different places to go and visit. So over 2021 you can expect to see the imminent return of the Meet the Brewery segments. We'll do more out and about videos as well. Once this whole COVID-19 pandemic thing buggers off, we've got lots of different things to do that are a little bit more vloggy. So I hope that you guys in the meantime continue to enjoy the different beer reviews that we're doing. But yeah, the other stuff will come back to the channel a little bit later on. I'm hoping that we get some more sake and whiskey reviews done at some stage soon as well, but I do have quite a lot of beer to work my way through at the moment. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. But like I say, this review is dedicated to you guys that are following the channel and my fellow beer tubers who I've had great fun with over the last few years, and a special shout out as well to my beer meals in various places around the world. So yeah, for this review then we have a little bit of a special beer, and this is one that has kind of eluded me for quite a wee while actually. So we are going to stick to Sweden for this one. We're going to go to Örebro out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. These guys are mainly known for doing traditional kind of German and English style beers, and they do some really nice examples of those, but they do quite a few American orientated beers as well. But the one we have today is pretty special actually. This is a newer version of one of their really famous beers. So for this review then, we are going to go to Närke Kulturbryggeri in Örebro, and we're having a look at the 2020 version of Stormaktsporter. So this one comes in at 10% ABV, and as the name and ABV suggest, this one is an Imperial Porter. So Stormaktsporter was the very first beer that these guys released, from what I understand. It is really quite famous in Sweden. For a period of time this beer was regarded as the best beer in the world, but obviously it was produced in a very small volume, so not a lot of people got the chance to try this one. And then later on there was the Kagen, the barrel aged Stormaktsporter as well. But yeah, I think this one should be pretty awesome to try. So a massive shout out to two people in this review, Matthias Storm and Alexander Klippel. Both of these guys sent me a bottle of this beer. When I accepted both of their offers, I thought that I was actually getting two different versions of the beer. But I think both of them had the same idea and sent me they sent me this particular one because it had been released. It was released a few months ago through the local Småskaligt assortment. I think that might have been November of 2020 if I remember rightly, and of course when it went into the web shop it sold out completely, but in the local area around Örebro there were quite a few bottles still on the shelf. So Matthias and Alexander both come from somewhere around Örebro, and they were able to get their hands on bottles of this beer, which was great. So a huge thank you to both Matthias and Alexander for sending me this beer. But what we'll do with the two bottles then, I'll do one of them in English obviously as this review, and we'll do the other one as my first Swedish language beer review, so you can look forward to that. What we'll do is the tasting notes and things that I have in this one, we'll use those as the basis for the Swedish review, because obviously it's a little bit more difficult to kind of think and speak spontaneously in Swedish still. My mother tongue is English, but I think it's a really good exercise, and I would love to do a few more Swedish language reviews for you guys over the next little while. The channel's had a lot of Swedish support over the years, so I think it would be really cool to review some kind of classic beers in Swedish as a thank you to my Swedish viewers. So the first Swedish review will be of this one. I will use the other bottle from our first Swedish review, and we'll see about filming that over the next couple of weeks. And obviously the notes and things like that we use in this will be based off my tasting experience with this one. I think that's a good way to kind of ease myself into it. But yeah, you can look forward to a Swedish language review of this beer as well. But huge thank you again to Matthias and Alexander for making this review possible. Awesome to be able to review this beer because it is pretty damn rare. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. I'm really looking forward to this. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Närke Kulturbryggeri before. There must be about 10 or 15 or so of them there, and I'm sure we'll add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Närke Kulturbryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So, as I've mentioned to you already, Närke Kulturbryggeri are based in Örebro, and these guys were founded back in 2003, which makes them one of the kind of older and more well-established craft breweries here in Sweden. So the company was founded by Håge Victorson, Hans Göran Victorson, to give the full name, and also Berit Karlsson. So Håge Victorson had a career as a photographer and an artist before he became a brewer, and Berit is actually the CEO of the company and also the chair of the Swedish Independent Brewers Association, the Sverige Oberoende Mikrobryggerier Myndigheter, from what I understand, or Föreningen. No. I think it would be Föreningen, association. I always mix up those words in Swedish. Myndighet, which is a government organisation, and Föreningen, which is more like a kind of club association. But yeah, there we go. But for a long time, this brewery were only producing keg beer, but in more recent times they started to produce bottled beers as well, and this has allowed them to kind of grow quite substantially. But this came after they bought the former brew kit on bottling machine of Nynäshamns own brewery, who are again, they're actually the first of the kind of new generation of Swedish craft breweries, and they also focus on the traditional English and German styles of beer. But this brewery currently produce around 100,000 litres of beer per year, and they're particularly famous for that beer I mentioned earlier, the Kagen Stormaktsporter, which was rated as the world's best beer for a long time on Rate Beer. That one was first produced back in 2004 as Stormaktsport, so this one is a kind of derivative of that original recipe, but then later it made its name when it was aged in bourbon barrels, and that was when it became known as the Kagen Stormaktsport. But sadly, Håge Victorson died quite recently in September of 2020. He died of cancer, and that made quite a few ripples in the Swedish brewing community. This guy was like the godfather of Swedish kind of craft brewing, if you like. I would have loved to have interviewed him here on the channel, but the brewery is going to carry on, thankfully. So the brewers are Emil Arvidsson and Jürgen Hjerling. They're also co-owners in the company now, and they're the ones running the production side of things, while Berit is taking care of the business side of the brewery, and of course she is still involved with the Sverige Oberoende Mikrobryggerier Föreningen. So yeah, the company is in a very strong position, and they will continue, thankfully. But as of March 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced some really interesting beers. They've produced, I think, about 140 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and I'm sure there will be many more to come over the next little while. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Närke Kulturbryggeri just now. Like I said, a very well respected brewery here in Sweden, one of the kind of the old boys on the block, and mainly dedicated to brewing German and English style beers, which is good. It's always nice to go to these guys for a kind of change of pace, if you like. There's so many of the kind of more modern American style breweries out there, but to have some of the old school stuff from these guys, pardon me, is always fun. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Närke Kulturbryggeri just now. The only other thing to mention would be that Närke is a kind of historic province, if you like, which is out to the west of Stockholm. I'm not sure exactly where the borders would be, but yeah, the area of Närke is kind of out to the west of Stockholm. It's a historic kind of county, much in the same way that Småland is. So Småland is kind of in the very southeast of Sweden, next to Kalmar and things like that. So yeah, in Sweden you've got the modern day counties, and then you've got the kind of historic provinces as well, and Närke is one of those. So that's what this brewery is named after, the historic province, in the historic province of the area in which Örebro is located, if that English makes sense. Probably does. My language gets very confused these days because I'm moving a lot between Swedish and English, Swinglish. But yeah, there we go. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can really tell you for the moment. If you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at this beer itself then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. And there you can see it's quite simple, this one, but the beers, they've always been like this actually. When I've seen a couple of these beers, the first time I ever saw these beers was actually in Tres Small Room in Gothenburg, and they've got a cabinet. When you go down into the little basement thing along the right hand side, they've got a cabinet full of really random and very, very rare beers, and you know, versions of this that go back a good number of years, back into, you know, 2006 and stuff like this. It's just crazy. But yeah, this beer has always had a label kind of like this one here, but it says this beer, an Imperial, they're saying it's an Imperial Stout with light honey, brewed on the 16th of the 1st 2020, and it's aged in the tank for 6 months. Kindly share this beer with good friends, and you can basically age the beer for many years, and we recommend the serving temperature of 14 degrees. So yeah, I'm drinking this one, you know, fairly fresh. I could age it for a while, but you know, this was a beer that was given to me by some viewers, so I want to get this one out there. I've got another few beers to review over the next little while that have been given to me by viewers. It's just been crazy with the reviews over the last little while, but yeah, this one is the Stormaktsporter 2020, 10% ABV. I also say I think it's they're saying it's an Imperial Stout, but you know, it says an Imperial Porter Stout on the back actually, and you know, when it's called Stormaktsporter, I would think it would be an Imperial Porter rather than an Imperial Stout. But yeah, you can see on the top there, Inget Blesk, which basically means that it's basically not shit, it's not piss, as they kind of say. That's one of the slogans of the brewery. But yeah, Närke Kulturbryggeri Stormaktsporter 2020. Again, a massive thank you to Matthias and Alexander for sending me the bottles of this beer, and you will see a Swedish review of this at some time over the next pardon me, couple of weeks. But yeah, 10% ABV, this one, 250 millilitres. I think this beer in Systembolaget cost like 60 kroners, so that's about £5 sterling, about €6, and then maybe, you know, $6.50, $7 American, something like that. But yeah, pretty special beer this, as I say. So let's get it out and we'll get on with the taste, and then very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. For those of you who aren't clear, nice little smoke on the opening, but for those of you who aren't clear on what the difference between an Imperial Stout and an Imperial Porter is, usually it's to do with the different yeast that you would use. So basically, a Porter is kind of lighter in the mouthfeel than a Stout is. So yeah, usually it's just a different kind of yeast actually that you would use for these, but yeah, usually it's the case that a Porter is lighter in the mouthfeel than a stout, if you like. Both styles originate from England, of course, although you've got various different types of stout, the Irish dry stout and the milk stouts and things like this, but the porter is also is from London. You get the Baltic porters as well, which are quite interesting. But as you can see, before that fades away, the beer poured with about a quarter finger of a frothy, quite, you know, medium dark tan head. It's not the darkest of tan heads that I've kind of come across, but that's just fading away to be a very thin foamy layer, and you've got a nice kind of thick ring just around the edge of the glass there. But overall it looks very, very nice. If we shine the light through this one, it's got a nice kind of there's a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi kind of coloured edge to the beer, but yeah, it's pretty much black as night actually. So yeah, that's kind of what you'd expect from an Imperial Stout, Imperial Porter, whatever we can call this one. I think it's a combination of the two, but yeah, it certainly looks the part, this one. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and you can see one or two little ones just going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall it looks pretty nice, and it is what you would expect from the style, as I've mentioned. So yeah, this looks as if it is going to be pretty damn good actually. But yeah, nothing surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance. So let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. I think this is going to be pretty special actually. So glad I picked this for number 2,750. Oh, that smells really nice. Yeah. You know, the one thing I would notice about this beer is that the smoothness would make me think porter rather than stout, you know, because it's just got a lovely... Porters for me have always come across as very kind of smooth, whereas the stouts have always been a little bit more kind of roasty and toasty, and that's the first impression I have of this beer. The aroma of it just comes across as very, very, very smooth, if that makes sense. So yeah, I have to say with this beer, if I was smelling it without knowing exactly what it was, I would probably guess that this was barrel aged. It does have a wee bit of a kind of woody sort of bourbon type undertone to it, which is quite interesting. So yeah, but it's not too prominent actually. But there is something that is just a little bit kind of barrel aging if you like, about this beer. But yeah, the first thing, as I say, you're going to notice about this one is the aroma is just, the backbone of this beer comes across as very, very smooth. It's got a lovely kind of smooth, sort of wholemealy, I don't know if I want to go as far as saying rye bready, but it's got a lovely kind of brown bready backbone to it and a smooth kind of bread crusty kind of thing. So I really like how all of that goes together in this beer. It's the smoothness of the backbone here is really, really very, very nice. So yeah, smooth bread crusty sort of thing, bit of wholemeal bread, and yeah, it's nice. There is maybe a wee touch of a kind of, you know, there is maybe a little touch of a kind of, you know, a wee touch of like a black malt. I don't think it's be special B. I've got a feeling that it could be, you know, oh, that's terrible, the name's going right in my head, Carafa. I've got a feeling that there might be some Carafa malts in here from Weiermann in Bamberg down in Germany, because it's got that smoothness about it, and it's also just got that kind of deep bready kind of thing. But yeah, the more that you smell of this beer, you do get the little brown sugar elements out of it. You can smell the honey. It almost comes across like a sort of honeycomb kind of thing actually, like a kind of, I would always say, I don't know how good a reference it is for Swedes, but caramel wafers. There's a biscuit in Scotland, the caramel wafers, it always reminds me of that. So it's got a wee bit of a kind of biscuity tone to it, definitely a wee touch of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of things, but it's almost like a wafer kind of thing, like an ice cream cone, but with a sort of caramel sauce kind of thing on top of it. But yeah, it's honey, that's the honey element coming out of this beer. But yeah, there's a wee bit of a chocolatey element to it as well, like a dried kind of powdery chocolate. If you think of like Oh Boy, or you know, the Nesquik powders that you use to make, you know, chocolate milk or hot chocolate, it kind of has a wee bit of that sort of chocolatey vibe to it. I don't get so much in the way of like darker brown sugars, you know, highly caramelized, treacly molasses sort of things. So yeah, a dried kind of powdery chocolate, some honey in there. You've got the kind of bready backbone that I was talking about. There's maybe one or two slightly woody undertones to this beer, like I said, but I don't get any kind of nuttiness or anything like that out of it, and it's the smoothness of the backbone of this beer that defines it for me as a porter rather than an imperial stout, I have to say. Although in fairness, you could maybe argue that that's a little bit kind of Russian imperial stout, but usually the Russian imperial stouts are a bit more kind of harsh and punchy in terms of the aroma. I think it's the smoothness that really makes it a porter, to be honest with you. But yeah, the porter is essentially the English equivalent of the German Schwarzbier or the Czech Tmavi, if you like. But obviously porter is an ale, those are lager beers. So ales, higher temperature fermentation, top fermenting yeasts. Lagers are lower temperature fermentations, bottom fermenting yeasts. But yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things with this beer then, you know, it's got a wee bit of a kind of earthiness to it. This beer, I'm obviously drinking it fairly fresh, so you can still get some of the greener elements out of it too. There's a little bit of floral character in there. There's a little bit of a kind of grassy note to it, a tiny little bit of zestiness. So yeah, there's definitely a bit of that going on in this beer for sure. So yeah, I wonder if it's English hops that are in this, you know, maybe Kent Goldings or something like that. I know that these guys like to kind of stick to their more traditional ingredients, if you like. But yeah, that definitely works. I think there's definitely a green component here, but the longer you age this, of course, the more those elements will drop out of the beer. But on the fruity side of things, on the fruity side of things, there's not too much going on. You get a little bit of blackcurrant out of it. There's maybe a teeny little bit of a raisiny sharpness and some figgy elements. But in the aroma, I don't get too much in the way of fruits. Raisiny sharpness, like I say, a little touch of fig and maybe a kind of softer blackcurranty element. So yeah, just maybe a wee element of a fruit, of a kind of cakey note in there as well. But otherwise, I think we've described the aroma of the beer pretty well. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in. We're going to have a taste of this one now and see how we get on. So this one is the Stormaktsporter 2020, or Stormaktsporter Shugi, as the Swedes would say, from Närke Kulturbryggeri, one of the really well respected breweries here in Sweden. A big shout out again to you guys for review number 2750, and a special thanks to Matthias Storm and Alexander Klipel, who supplied me with a bottle of beer each. So yeah, let's get stuck in. 10% Imperial Porter Stout as they're putting it. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh, that is damn good. I can see why this beer is very, very highly rated. That's lovely. Yeah. The thing that's, you know, the thing that's getting me about this beer just now is, these days there's so many of these big pastry stouts, these big thick oaty things going around. It's really nice to come back to something like this that's a bit more old school. And you know, it just really makes you kind of appreciate these things more. There's a new brewery back home in Scotland that I got to try at Christmas called New Barnes Brewery, and it's people from the Kernel in London, Scottish people that used to work for the Kernel, who have established this brewery. And I think there might actually be a Swede involved in there as well, either that or he's Norwegian. But anyway, they did a beer that was called Plain Dark Beer. And it was just it was like a 10% old school Russian Imperial Stout, and this beer reminds me of that. You know, and as I say, it's so nice to go back to something that's just like properly old school, because, you know, after all these big, thick, oaty, kind of sweet pastry stout sort of things, you really appreciate the old school stuff a little bit more. And that's kind of that's my first thought when it comes to trying this beer, is that the old school nature of this one is just, you know, very, very nice. That's what really gets me about this one. So yeah, this is just a lovely beer actually. So I'm just going to say straight away, thumbs up to Närke Kulturbryggeri, and again a huge thank you to Matthias and Alexander for providing the bottles of this beer. And I'm looking forward to doing the Swedish tasting of this one as well. So yeah, this is just a lovely beer. If you do get the chance to try this one, I would highly recommend it. Let me know in the comment section below where you're getting a hold of this beer as well, because I'm not sure how far afield this beer goes outside of Sweden, unless other than, you know, with enthusiasts or whatever. But yeah, it's a very rich flavour. Yeah, it is pretty damn awesome actually. I wonder if they're going to do a vintage of this each year. But yeah, this is a lovely beer. So where to start with this one? It's actually, this beer really comes across, it's one of these ones where the flavour that you get really is very, very similar to what you would expect from the aroma. That's one of my alarms on my phone going off, typical when I'm filming. But yeah, it's got a lovely smoothness to it. So, you know, it really, how do you say it? It really reflects the aroma very well in terms of its flavour. So the backbone of this beer is that lovely kind of smoothness, if you like. You get that bread crusty backbone. They are just forming the baseline of the beer. It's not an overly toasty bread crust, as you can sometimes get from Carafa. I do suspect it's one of the Carafas that's in here, but it gives you that you've got a lovely just smoothness to the beer. So you've got the bread crusty notes forming the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you get a layer of a kind of wholemeal type bread. I hesitate to go as far as saying rye bread, because rye bread has that element of sweetness to it. And this one doesn't really have that, so it's got a smooth bread crusty layer, a layer of kind of wholemeal bready sort of thing, and that's the middle third of your palate. If you go either side of that, you do get a wee bit more of a harsh kind of toasty bread crusty sort of thing, and that almost draws the border between the different thirds of your tongue, if you like. I like to separate the tongue into 3/3, but yeah, on the back third of your tongue you do get a wee bit more of a kind of roasty toasty kind of grainy kind of thing, but the breadiness on the back third of your palate feels a little bit thicker. This is where you get a bit more of the kind of yeasty element of the beer coming out, I think. So yeah, there is a bit more of a kind of thick brown bready yeasty kind of thing on that back third of your palate. So if you start at the back of the tongue and move forward, you can feel the thickness just drops away gradually, but then it drops away quite sharply as you reach that the border with that kind of middle third of your tongue, and then it comes across, the middle third of your palate comes across as kind of slightly dense in a sense. You get that bread crusty kind of thing, and then the slightly thicker brown bready character as well. But on top of that, you get those kind of powdered chocolate elements in there. For me, the chocolate, as I say, I put it down as being, you know, a sort of 60-70% cocoa kind of thing. It is a more dark chocolate that you get out of this one, definitely, and it's a kind of powdery chocolate, like I mentioned earlier, like Nesquik or Oh Boy or something like that. These chocolate powder things that you use to make chocolate milk or hot chocolate, whatever, that's what you get out of this one, definitely. So yeah, it's the chocolate elements, I think they do almost mellow out a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste of the beer, but yeah, it's a sort of powdery 60-70% cocoa chocolate that you get out of this one. In the very centre of your palate, there's definitely some brown sugary elements in there as well. I hesitate to say it's not. It has the sort of lightness of honey. I mean, it's definitely a honey element, you know, there's no doubt in my mind about that. But it feels a little bit, there's a sort of sweet caramel element in there as well, which I really, really like. So yeah, definitely some sweet caramel in there, some nice roasty, toasty elements as well. I think the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, you get a few more kind of roasty, toasty elements to the brown sugars, but it's not overly harsh. That's the thing about this beer. It's one of these ones where everything just kind of blends together very, very well. So for those of you watching in Sweden, I think one of the Scottish breweries that you guys might be quite likely to come across at some stage will be New Barns. And if you ever see a beer called the Plain Dark Beer, it's basically this. I think it's actually about the same percentage. I'm sure it's about, it might be a little bit more. I think it might be about 11% or so. But this beer really, really reminds me of the Plain Dark Beer from... It really reminds me of the Plain Dark Beer that I had from New Barns at Christmas. That's the contextual cue I'm getting with this beer. But this is lovely. It's a properly just old school beer, this one. So yeah, middle of your palate, you've got a bit of a sweet kind of caramel element to it there, but it's not overly heavy or overly oily. That's the alcohol flavours that's giving you this. But yeah, you do get a wee element of a biscuity note as you go further out from the centre of the palate, and the honey is kind of in there as well, and that kind of sits on top of the kind of chocolatey powdery element I was talking about. But yeah, it strikes me as a very straight shooting, very old school beer, this one. I think that's a good way to kind of summarise it up. But yeah, if you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back, you will notice a few woody elements that come out of this beer. So yeah, I do like that about this one. It's properly old school, and it's just, you know, really, really very, very good. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, I think we've covered the malty elements in this beer as much as we need to. But yeah, in the back corners of the palate then, there's a wee bit of earthiness, and you also get a really nice... there's a wee touch of earthiness to this one. You also get a really nice kind of herbal quality, a very slight herbal quality as you move further forward on the side of the tongue there. And as you reach the front corners of the palate, you get a little bit of a kind of floral element coming out of the beer. I do think that it's maybe, it strikes me as being like a mix of American and English hops that are in this one. So it might be something like, you know, Kent Goldings or a bit of Bramling's Cross maybe that's in this one. Fugels, I think, could be an option, but although Fugels usually has a bit of a kind of ashy earthiness to it, and this beer doesn't strike me as being overly earthy and ashy, so I think it's more likely to be, you know, Kent Goldings or Bramling's Cross that's in this one, because it has got a wee bit of that English herbal quality to it. But as you move further forward, I say you get a little bit of floral note on the front corners of the palate, then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, like I said. So I do like that about this beer for sure. So yeah, the green element of this beer for me is really nice, and as I say, the longer you age this beer, the kind of smoother it's going to get and things like that. So a little bit floral, a little bit kind of grassy, and yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer, I think just it's one of these beers where everything just fits together, and the green components, the hoppy side of the things, fit together very well with the malt base. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of things just to round off. So as I said, in that border region between front and middle third of your palate, you get a wee kind of cakey element to the beer. It's got a little bit of that, you know, the underneath of it is a little bit sort of cakey. You do get a bit of a kind of well-fired bread crusty sort of thing to it, and the basis of that front third of your palate is a little bit kind of brown bready and things as well. So I really like that about this beer. It's got a brown bready sort of cakey undertone to it. I think the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, it gets a bit more woody and cakey, if that makes sense. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit of a raisiny sharpness. It's more, but then it develops quite quickly to be more of a juicy kind of plum. And as you move further forward, it's got an element of figginess to it. But then on the front half of that front third of your palate, there's blackcurrant in there, and there's a wee bit of a more oily blackberry starts to emerge out of it too. So yeah, I really like how everything goes together in this beer. It's a really nicely executed one. It's one of these ones, as I say, it's very old school. You know, it doesn't sort of do anything surprising for the style if you know the style well, but it's just beautifully executed, and you can't ask for much more than that these days. This is a properly old school Imperial Porter for me. Really, really nicely done. So massive thumbs up to Närke Kulturbryggeri for this one, and again a thank you to Matthias and Alexander for giving me the chance to try this beer, because I think this is one that I would have struggled to find for a long time actually. So awesome to have followers like that will send you some of the more random beers actually. So yeah, here we are. Yeah, so I think that just covers the flavour profile of this beer quite nicely, to be honest with you. But mouthfeel wise, I would say that this beer is kind of top end to mid-bodied, bottom end to full-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth in this one. It's got a bit of slickness to it, a little touch of oiliness, but yeah, I would say overall quite slick. That's kind of what you would expect from a porter. As I mentioned, the main difference between a porter and a stout for me is the level of thickness that you're going to get out of the beer. And yeah, this one just has it's got a really nice level of mouthfeel for an Imperial Porter. In terms of IBUs and things, I think this one's probably, you know, a sort of 70 IBU type beer. It doesn't strike me as being overly dry and bitter. It's just nicely executed. Again, like I said, it's got a lovely kind of smoothness to it, this beer, and a little bit of slickness overall. So yeah, maybe about 70 IBUs this one. 60-70 IBUs, although I'll say that and I'll be wrong. Remember, the IBU count is my weakest part of beer reviewing, but the malt is, like I say, very, very smooth. A little bit of sweetness coming out of it, both from the chocolatey side of things and from the kind of brown sugars, but the chocolate is a bit more kind of dry, if you like. It develops a bit more of a woody quality later on in the beer, and the fruits are, you know, kind of nice and slick and slightly oily as well. So it's just a really, really well executed beer, this one, I have to say, and I think it's properly old school. But you know, sometimes that's what you want, and I have to say I've just really, really enjoyed this one. So I'm just going to say massive thumbs up to Närke Kulturbryggeri for this beer. I'm looking forward to doing my Swedish review of this one. It's an excuse to taste it again, and we'll see if it kind of changes. If my sort of, you know, having tried it once, see if my opinion of it changes a little bit in the Swedish review. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this English take on the beer. So yeah, let's leave it there then. This one was the Stormaktsporter 2020, Stormaktsporter 2020 in Swedish, from Närke Kulturbryggeri in Örebro here in Sweden. I think this was a really nice beer to review for 2,750, and I think this has been just an awesome experience to finally get around to trying one of the versions of this beer. So yeah, again, huge thank you to Matthias and Alexander for making this review possible. I hope that you guys watching enjoyed it. As always, let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Närke Kulturbryggeri. Let me know what your favourite version of Stormaktsporter has been. Hopefully at some stage we can try the Kagen version. I would love to have a go at that, but we'll just need to see how that works out. But this has been an awesome one to try, and I hope that that you guys have enjoyed this. So thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Närke Kulturbryggeri, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. Sláinte, skull, cheers, and here's to another 2,750 reviews.